I'm Zach Varda, and this week on the Student Slant, we come back from a 2-week break and talk about an SPJ trip to DC and what we learned as aspiring journalists. Last year, we really got the SPJ chapter here at Ohio State up and going again, SPJ being Society of Professional Journalists, and we are obviously a student chapter. It had been defunct for a little while here, and we got it up and going. And we were, kicking around ideas of ways to kind of get people engaged, make sure it's fun. We obviously want to expand our work and skills as journalists, but we want to have fun while we're at it. And we ended up falling on the idea of going to Washington, DC over our fall break for a couple reasons. Obviously, it's an important city. It's the capital of the nation, but there's a lot of great journalism that goes there, a lot of great journalism outlets, especially in this era of politics. And we had OSU alums that were there, Ohio State alums that we could link up with and get tours that maybe weren't exactly available to the public. And so when this year rolled around, it was kind of a no-brainer for us to go back. We got to see a lot of cool places that we didn't get to see last year, got to change it up, got to, learn from things that change. Anybody who's planned a trip, you do it. If you do it again, you can improve it. Not going to get into those details. That's not what this podcast is about, but we got a chance to go again and had a really fun time, and we figured we could share what we learned there as aspiring journalists with other aspiring journalists and kind of give people not so much as a recap of our vacation, but a recap of what we were able to glean from talking to really respected journalists in DC that are really at the heart of some of the best journalism that's going on in the country. My name's Zach Varda.
And I'm Jake Ray, and this is the Student Slant. So, sorry everyone for our 2-week break. I know we haven't had an episode in a while. 2 weeks ago, my sister had a baby, so I had to go home, and it happened to fall directly on a Thursday. So we really didn't get a chance to record, and we didn't plan for that ahead because it was just sort of all of a sudden. And then last week, like we said, we were in D.C., so it was kind of hard to do a podcast from a hotel room. So we kind of moved our episode as far away as we could, and just decided to take a 2-week break and come back when we could. So, overall, what was your favorite part of DC, Zach?
That's tough. I mean, cliche answer, the camaraderie, obviously. Mm-hmm. We got to go with a lot of really cool people I didn't know that well before the trip. A lot of the Lantern staff, not a lot, but, there were some of us from the Lantern staff, but then there are a lot of people that are not even to the point of being Lantern reporters yet. They're in their first journalism class, and they got to come along as part of SPJ, and that was really cool. But getting more to the professional journalism, what I learned side, favorite part, it was really cool to go to CNN. We got a very candid behind-the-scenes tour of CNN. We saw pretty much everything there. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was really not anything we didn't see. Phil Mattingly, who is their Hill correspondent, their top guy on the Hill, is an Ohio State alum and is, loves Ohio State and is really, in the last years made efforts to help out aspiring journalists from Ohio State. So he was more than willing when we reached out to give us a tour.
I mean, to be honest, he hooked us up. It's the best way. He hooked us up.
Yeah, and getting to meet people like that was really cool. We got to meet Jake Tapper, who was, those are busy days for him on Fridays. Mm-hmm. We got to meet Wolf Blitzer, who I thought had some incredible insights for aspiring journalists about how to make your name and not make your name, but how to move forward as a journalist. And I think one interesting thing he said was practice, 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 which we usually apply to, I think, for most people that cliche, or not cliche, but that term applies to sports, but it certainly applies to journalism. And I know we've talked about on this podcast before about journalism kind of being a craft mm-hmm. or a trade. There are a lot of things you go to school for, and there's this finite amount of knowledge that you need to do your job, and kind of once you know it, it's just about going out and applying it. But with journalism, we've heard from so many people, and then to hear it from someone like Wolf Blitzer, there's always room for improvement. It's practice, practice, practice. You can always get better. And there's so many facets. You could become a better writer. You could become a better interviewer. You could become better at finding good story ideas. So that was really cool. And I think CNN is a great place for aspiring journalists to look at as the forefront of the intersection of all the different forms of journalism. They do obviously people think of them as a TV station, but as the DC bureau chief told us, they do not consider themselves a TV station.
Mm-hmm.
Their TV station is part of what CNN is, but CNN is a news organization that has a website that has, they don't have print, but they have print-style articles on their website. They have multimedia-style articles on their website. They have their TV shows. I'm pretty sure they have podcasts. You have people doing on-the-ground reporting that is still the base of everything, is that on-the-ground reporting that a Phil Mattingly does, so he can, make sure things that are going on at headquarters and the studios are well informed when it's being sent out to millions of people. So really learning about that intersection of journalism and as many people on this podcast have said, the bureau chief told us, you need to be able to do everything. You need to be able to take pictures, write a print style article, write for online, write for TV, write for, not radio, but podcast, which is essentially the same thing. You need to be able to know, videotape a little bit, take photos, know how to put a package together. Maybe you don't have the skills that an engineering team has, but you know what a video package is supposed to look like and the general idea of how to edit one together. How to do a stand-up. I mean, I could go on and on. There's so many tools journalists need to know nowadays. And I felt like CNN was really the pinnacle of where that all kind of comes together.
I thought it was interesting, too. We met all these big-name people. We got to go on set of Inside Politics. But we also got to see all this behind the scenes, all these news gatherers, all these journalists who are just doing things that maybe would be considered grunt work, but at the same time is extremely important for their whole – and their bureau chief emphasized that. He really emphasized how important it was that all of these people are going out and getting news and doing their jobs. And even the people that are still on TV, like Jake Tapper, for example, yeah, he may be the one on TV, and you might think, oh, he's just the guy that's getting that information and then condensing it down and giving it to an audience. But at the same time, we came out to him, he was doing a political cartoon. Like, it was...
And he does his own reporting. For anybody that really knows the guy, he goes out and does reporting still.
Yeah, he's not just on TV. Like, he is a journalist, and there's a ton of journalists doing background stuff, a ton of people that really make CNN go, and I thought that was super interesting, like when we went into their control room and got to see all of the TV changing and how they could get everything to go and graphics and little widgets on the bottom of the screen, and just, it's a production, man.
Yeah, and I will say, not just CNN, but so, I don't want to just kind of recap what we saw and be a Washington, D.C. Trip ad.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that I would really advocate that anybody that's interested in political reporting or hard news reporting or just looking to get their start, DC really seems like the place to go. There's nowhere really in the country except maybe New York that has so many journalism outlets working. From small to large, we saw two Ohio State alums, Teresa Cardenas and Owen Doherty, who both got jobs pretty much straight out of college working in D.C. So it's really cool to see a city like that still cares so much about journalism and still is hiring so many young journalists. Obviously, as a young journalist, someone coming out of college, you get a little bit worried about where the industry is right now with a lot of places downsizing. But you go to this place and journalism is actually expanding. And, CNN told us that they're actually hiring more people than they were. And they're getting bigger. And, obviously being that big of a news organization, they're going to be a little bit different from everybody else. But really in journalism in general is expanding in D.C., and I think it's a great place for someone who's just looking for a job. I mean, we talked to Owen Doherty, who was, Ohio State alum, was just on the Lantern staff last year. He basically just went out to move to D.C. without a job and then found one. And it's one of those few cities where that is probably a viable strategy. Abby Vasolis kind of did the same thing. She had an internship there, and she just knew she wanted to work in D.C. She's at Time, Ohio State alum. And she just kind of stayed in D.C. and waited till that job came. And, it's kind of betting on yourself, obviously, but there's not a whole lot of cities where there's enough journalism jobs to do that. So I think it was really great to see a city like that where, our profession, our industry is still, revered, even if some of the politicians in that city are trying to knock it down.
So we also went to USA Today, and time, like you said, with Abby Vasulis, and we got to talk with Susan Page from USA Today, who's like their bureau chief, and then we got to talk to Ryan Beckwith, who's from Time, and I feel like their big lesson for all of us was just to keep grinding. Like Susan Page just talked about how she kind of just kept building, and then all of a sudden she was at USA Today and she was their bureau chief, and then Ryan Beckwith gave us this insane story, honestly, of how he just kept working and kept applying, and he would just call up places and ask for like an informational interview and then give them their resume, and he went literally cross country living out of his car until he finally got a call from somewhere in North Carolina, and then he got caught in a snowstorm from flying in, and then basically finagled his way with a bus driver to drive him to his interview. It just, that was like the big lesson to me, is like they just kept saying, like, never give up. If you really want to get here, just keep working, and then you'll get to this like same peak. And I felt like that was a huge lesson that we all got to learn, and it was really nice.
Yeah, especially today, I think it's a good lesson to keep in mind because, so much of applying to jobs now is online, so you can very easily, submit your resume to, one of those places that, aggregates resumes and sends them out.
Yeah.
You can just fill out your online applications. But I think, I would hope for most young journalists, they would understand the power of a phone call. We only do our interviews over in person, is priority, and then maybe a phone call, never like email, except for special circumstances. So you would hope that journalists, young journalists coming up, and me being one of them, obviously, understand that, like, the power of the face-to-face conversation, because it can be really easy to or the follow-up phone call, because it can be easy to slip into, well, I applied online, they're going to see my application. If I have the best application, they're going to get it. Well, these people that are at the top of these organizations were applying at one point, but what they were doing that were getting in the jobs were the follow-up phone calls, showing up at the door, being willing to go through a snowstorm to get somewhere. When people weren't even hiring, showing up asking for jobs just because they wanted to do exploratory interviews. So I don't know if journalism's different than any other industry in that sense, where, putting in the effort to getting the job will impress your boss, your prospective boss, but it's easy to get caught up in the wash of, I'll just apply to all these places online and wait to hear back. And these people were like, no, you need to be showing up at people's doors and knocking on their doors, blowing up their phones to a reasonable extent until you get a job, and keep doing that. Even when you get your first job, keep working that hard so you can move forward.
I like that you mentioned that your favorite part was camaraderie, just because I do feel like there were some kids there from our 22-21 class, which is our basic journalism course, and then all the way up to people like you and I who are editors at The Lantern. And I feel like it really sort of inspired them as well. Just talking to them, getting to know them a little bit better, and like hearing what they want to do with their own careers, I felt like was inspiring to me, honestly. What I wanted to do, feeling good that The Lantern's going to like have a place to go afterwards. These kids are like really looking up to what we want to do, what they want to do, where we are now. And I don't know, it was inspiring for me to really be able to see.
It really was.
Yeah.
And we're entering internship season, or actually really kind of, winding down. I think most news journalism internships are kind of, November 1st is the latest. You usually see deadlines for people trying to find jobs next summer. So I think that being in that context was really good. I think it probably gave a lot of people a lot of tips on internships. Journalism is, I don't know if it's probably a unique profession in the sense, not unique, as our journalism professors would tell us. You never use the word unique, but it's a, rare profession in the sense that you break in with internships. A lot of professions, it's internships in college, then entry-level jobs after college. For these major internships, a lot of times with journalism, you're not even really getting the major internships until you're out of college. So I think it was Wolf Blitzer who said internships. And that was the perfect message, and getting these tips was the perfect time because, we got about 2 weeks left here in really peak internship season for people to be applying. And, hopefully maybe one person that was on that trip, 2, 3, something they picked up in DC is what leads to them getting a job this coming summer.
Yeah, I also think it's important, I know we mentioned it, but the networking opportunities that we've had, like, through that DC trip and, like, through alumni, being able to even just reach out to get tours. But I mean, at the same time, that is also somewhere where it's like a touchstone in DC. There's like 4 or 5 people that we could reach out to.
To have Phil Mattingly tell you you can email him at any time for help getting a job it's you can't really quantify how helpful that is. Like, and we are blessed here. We have Nicole Kraft, Spencer Hunt that help us get jobs here at OSU, and then we have alums like Phil Mattingly that are willing to, put their name on the line, put their neck out for you, and help you get your foot in the door somewhere. And especially someone who's doing so much great reporting in D.C., if you want to go into politics reporting, to have Phil Mattingly look at you and say, yeah, just give me an email and I can help you find a job. He's not going to find the job for you, but he can help you, point you in the right direction to start networking. You can't put a price tag on that kind of help when you're trying to find your next internship, your next job.
That was a great discussion. Join us next week on the Student Slant for more student perspective.